Welcome, I'm Hernan Murdoch. In this episode, we're going to take a look at how we document internal controls. To help us better understand how we document internal controls, Kathleen Crawford, who has a lot of experience in internal auditing, is going to help us better understand some different tools that are available and that are widely used by internal auditors. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hi, Hernan.
So, we would like someone to help us better understand how we document internal controls. And I know that there are a number of tools that are widely used by internal auditors. So, could you walk us through maybe the top three?
Absolutely. So let's start first with the internal control questionnaire. An internal control questionnaire is an excellent tool for gaining an understanding of what controls are operating
Mhm.
and conversing or interviewing folks who have responsibility for maintaining internal controls. So it's a document that's a series of questions, as the name implies, and the
Mhm.
questions are typically fairly short and closed-ended. So most of the time, you'll get yes, no answers. So from an advantage point, it's brief. The control questions themselves will be brief. They will focus on control techniques. It's a document that's very flexible. You can put into it and take out of it what applies or doesn't apply, and it's designed to cover all pertinent points. What's also beneficial about an ICQ is that it provides standardization. So you could ask the same questions of a group of people and determine if their answers sync up. It's very easy
Okay.
to develop, and there are many, many examples in the marketplace by industry, by department, by function. So
Mhm.
it's a very advantageous and easy thing to use.
Great, very good. Thank you. So, yes, advantages are definitely are in abundance. What are some of the drawbacks or disadvantages of using ICQs?
There are a number of them. You have to think about whether or not you are getting enough detail. So, an ICQ may not provide you enough detail despite the advantages that we just spoke about, and you might miss some important information. It can be
Hmm.
difficult to teach someone how to administer it because the tool in itself is closed ended questions. But if you're administering it in person, you want to augment that with some discussion. A lot of times it is sent via email and collected back, and there's no opportunity to be interactive. And as I say, you might miss some important information because you didn't follow up with a question. It's not
Yeah.
very creative. So you
Okay.
might miss those questioning skills and those control points as a consequence.
Hmm. Yes. So yes, I've used those in the past, and there are a number of things that we did to help overcome some of those disadvantages. And one of those was to maybe mix some of the closed-ended questions, which a lot of them are, because you want to verify facts and figures and dates and names and quantities. But you can also have some open-ended questions that can help provide an opportunity for the
Mhm.
responder to provide more detail around some of the questions and topics you would like to explore. So that's one way that I know that we did that. And also, in terms of the questioning, and you mentioned that it stifles creativity because you don't have the ability to real time ask, but it goes back to the design of the
Mhm.
questionnaire. So you need to ask your questions very clearly. What exactly do you want to know? And help the participant or the responder with the quantities or the units that you want. So, for example, I remember a few times we were asking, this is early on, and I like to share the mistakes that I've made because it helped me learn. And I also want other fellow auditors to also learn from those. So we're not very clear about what we're asking. So we're asking about how often something happened. And I remember responses coming back saying often, not so often, every once in a while, two
Mhm.
times a week, four times a month. And I realized that that was not very helpful. So what I needed to do is ask them, how many times a week does this happen? Uh, and so on. And it just clarified the responses going
Mhm.
forward. But you have to be very specific because otherwise it just forces you to do a follow-up question that you could have avoided by just rephrasing the way you asked the question.
Indeed.
So, very, very helpful. And then one last thing I want to, because I don't want to finish by talking about disadvantages, I want to talk about the advantages. So,
Advantage.
absolutely. So, one of the things that I remember very vividly, especially with operational audits, but it's also helpful for compliance reviews, is just having it done as a way of comparing if you're having a review that involves multiple locations, and then having the questionnaire go out to those multiple places and asking them on a positive note about best practices, but also about how they're doing something so you can compare it. So now you can also collect information, but you can also start doing some benchmarking. And another thing that I like to do is think in terms of overlaying risk with everything I do. So thinking in terms of what does it look like an anomaly, if you will, so that we can focus on those things so we have a better sense about what we're going to emphasize during our review. So yes, ICQ is definitely a very important tool. Tell us about another one.
Well, the next one up is narratives. Narratives, so if you contrast what you were just saying and I was just saying about ICQs, narratives, we can go wild. We can go wild in terms of breadth and depth. There's lots of opportunity to get the full detail of the area under review. Usually the narrative follows either a conversation through an interview, or it might follow reading about the area processor system. So we might have read a lot of policies and procedures, and the narrative is a summary of what we've read or a summary of what we've heard from stakeholders, from folks who are acquainted with the area processor system. So we get the full detail of the
Mhm.
area under review. It's very simple to not only create with word processing software, but to update it time over time if we're doing a similar review in a future year. It's
Right.
good for small areas, particularly if you like to flowchart as well, which is something we'll be talking about shortly. Um, it's a very good supplement for small areas that don't need a flowchart, or for explaining things that the flowchart might need to expand on. So it
Yes.
has a lot of advantages. My personal favorite in terms of advantage is that once you have created it, you put it in your work product. When you come back to an area that's very similar, that you're going to be doing, pull that flowchart, rather pull that narrative out and see what still applies and what has changed, and just update it.
Mhm.
And it's a fairly straightforward process.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah, so the narratives definitely are very natural, right? So most people are familiar with just sitting there in front of some word processing software and just typing away. So some of the benefits of that are definitely just something that you have probably done in school, and it just provides a way of you capturing those. But you have to be very careful. You mentioned that they can just keep going and going and
Uh-huh.
going, and before you know it, you have a novel, and that is not what we're aiming for. So we have to make sure we capture what's relevant, what is pertinent to the review, and also in the way we write so that it flows logically,
Yes.
and that anyone who reads it understands what you're talking about. So that's another important thing to always keep in mind with narratives, but definitely a very, very popular tool, widely used by internal auditors. How about the third one? And I think that is going to be a flowchart.
I think you might
Is
be
it?
right.
Okay, yes,
I
tell us
think you
about
might be
flowcharts.
right. So,
Yes.
yes, I foreshadowed that, didn't I? Flowcharts are terrific because they are a visual tool. So, by many estimates, human beings, and we're working with human beings in the areas, processes, and systems that we're auditing, and we ourselves are humans. Humans tend to capture and appreciate information visually, so through our eyes. And this makes this tool particularly apt for better understanding of how something flows, how something works. It can be a teaching tool. It's certainly a managerial tool, but the concept of emphasis and subordination when we put this together can make it so easy for errors or unexplained situations to pop out.
Yes.
That picture worth a thousand words cliche is absolutely applicable here. It's not a cliche, it's a benefit for us to have something visual with which to see where things begin, what happens in the middle, what happens at the end. And to your earlier point about comparing internal control questionnaires, we can compare flow charts not only year over year, but location over location and see what might be different about the processes that people follow.
Yes.
So very, very good for discussions, very useful, very easy to review, sitting shoulder to shoulder with a client and making
Hmm.
sure that we have the right information in the right place.
Yes, definitely. So, yes, flowcharts definitely a tool that a lot of auditors use. Some auditors don't, and even some managers are reluctant to give their auditors or their staffers the go ahead because they believe that it's going to take a long time. And sometimes it does take a long time to prepare. But my advice is always it'll take longer at the beginning when you're learning how to use it or how to do it. But as you gain more experience, familiarity, it will become easier. So it should be seen as an investment. And the information you can capture, like you said, is worth 1,000 words. So the benefits can far outweigh that. In the longer term, you just need to think of it strategically. It seems like you concur with that.
I
Have you seen
do.
that also
I
with
have
some of your clients over
absolutely.
the years?
I think for some, there's an intimidation factor because they feel that they
Yeah,
don't know the symbols and what if I make a mistake?
right.
But I tell newer auditors, if you're worried about that, then why don't you flow chart with post-it notes?
Hmm. Okay, great
Whatever
tip.
you've read about the system, process, or functional area, write down the steps on a post-it note, put them up, and see if the flow makes sense to you, and
Hmm.
then draft it in the flow charting software. But flow
Right,
charting software these days is very, very forgiving. You're not going to
right,
make a mistake, and if you do, it's easily erased or it's easily
exactly.
rearranged.
Right,
So, yeah.
exactly. And another benefit of what you just described, so I like that tip very much. So another thing we can do with that is that it lends itself to collaboration.
Hmm.
So you're not sitting behind a screen asking the client about the process. The two of you can work at it together. If you use the post-it notes approach or any other software tool, you can have it also online. There are
Sure.
many applications you can use for that purpose, and you can do it and share that image as you develop it, so it becomes a collaborative product, not just the auditor's product.
Yeah.
So definitely something that can help a lot. Now, one of the challenges, um, I'm going to have to finish this piece. Last one I finished with a positive, and
Okay.
I highlighted some of the positives already. So let's say I already got that in. But one of the challenges that auditors have is which symbols to use, and most of the applications out there that allow you to do flowcharting gives you hundreds of
Hmm.
choices for symbols. My experience has been that I can get by with a handful. And my rule of thumb is always, does it convey the message? So don't overcomplicate it. So what are some of the key symbols? I'm going to assume that you also follow that
I do
same
too.
approach, which
I
is
very much
make it
do.
simple, make it easy, use your budget wisely while you're doing your audit. So choose a few symbols and go with them. So which are
Exactly.
some of those that you think should be the baseline ones that provide covered that 85% of the needs that you will have when drawing a flowchart?
Well, I do have a handful, as you suggested, simple flow charting symbols, simple symbols that have broad applicability in flow charting. So it starts with a symbol that looks like a flattened oval. So the oval represents a start or end point. We start with the oval, we end with the oval. The
Mhm.
arrows, they're just lines that connect things. So we
Yes,
can show relationships, we can show steps. So whatever the represented shapes are, the representative shapes are, we're going to draw lines between them with an arrow indicating directionality. So,
yes,
for example, if you're talking about a decision, which is the box at the bottom of this graphic, we want to make sure that if there are things that are happening and it's a yes/no choice, that we have arrows going in both directions so we can see what happens if the answer is
yes,
yes or if the answer is no.
right,
Input output. This is one of those areas, Hernan, you know that there are dozens and dozens of possibilities here. Let's keep it
right,
simple. Input and
yes,
output should just be a parallelogram. So, a
yes,
parallelogram is a fancy name for a tilted rectangle. And then
Yes.
speaking of rectangles, a process can be depicted with a rectangle. And then the decision is the diamond shape that indicates that there's I guess a
A
fork in the
decision.
road. Yes, a fork in the
That's
road
right.
in the form of a decision. So
That's right.
you see,
Yeah.
there's five, and they cover so much territory, so many possibilities. So I agree, simpler is better, and maybe
That's right.
simpler will bring down that intimidation factor that some people have.
Exactly right, and what some managers can do, and of course staff, if they are listening to our presentation here, is basically say, okay, well, if I can simplify, maybe I can convince my manager. And for managers, they can basically set expectations with their staff and say, okay, I would like you to limit it to 5 or 6 symbols, and let's just go at it. So thank you very much. It was very helpful, and your explanations were very much aligned with what we were hoping to hear, because you have so many choices of things to do, and but we can narrow it down, and that's part of the effectiveness and efficiency in what we do as auditors. So we can document our internal controls using our internal controls questionnaires, ICQs, narratives, and flowcharts. Thank you very much.
It's entirely my pleasure.
If you like this series, subscribe to the ACI Learning YouTube channel to enjoy more audit-related content.